Neosha, and I hope all of you will get a lot of value out of this presentation. So the topic of the presentation today is choosing the best digital marketing campaigns for your industry, budget, and goals. And this is a presentation that's usually more than an hour, so I'll try and move through it fairly quickly to make sure that I stop at that 45-minute mark to give you guys a chance to have questions. So Neosha kind of already gave an introduction, but just a little bit more about us, Beanstalk. We're based in Webster Groves. We specialize in web design, digital marketing, and app development. We have a lot of expertise working with nonprofits, and as some of you may have already heard about it, we have a free hosting for nonprofits program that we've been running for over 5 years now, donating over $150,000 in in-kind services. So that's a program that's actually still available. We're adding around 5 nonprofits a year to that program. So if any of you are interested in that, reach out to us in October and November, and we'll talk to you about the application process to get free hosting. So our roadmap for today, we're going to kind of talk through the thesis of what this presentation is about, and then we're going to dig into the 3 broad categories of digital marketing, which are inbound marketing, outbound marketing, and nurturing. And within each category, we'll talk about some of those services and try to identify which ones would be a good fit for you. So just to give a brief summary of each of these, what the differences are. So inbound marketing is when someone is searching for your product or service. So they're going out primarily on Google and they're searching for something. They're trying to make yourself seen in response to whatever their search phrase may be. Outbound marketing is kind of the opposite of that. You're pushing a message out to people that may or may not be interested in your products or services. So the key to outbound marketing is to make sure it's hyper-targeted, so the people that you are hitting are people that are more likely to be interested. And then nurturing, that's kind of the higher level of digital marketing. A lot of organizations don't get into this until they're a bit more evolved, but that would be taking existing prospects, existing customers, in the case of nonprofits, maybe existing donors or volunteers, and doing things to nurture them, make them more likely to come back, give them opportunities for if you're selling something for a cross-sell or an upsell. So the thesis of this presentation is not to waste your time focusing on all methods of digital marketing or focusing on the wrong methods. What we want to see you do is follow the strategy that leads to the best return on investment. So digital marketing compared to traditional advertising like radio, TV, print, billboards, it can be the best method and it often has the highest ROI. But what we really want to watch out for is in workshops like this one, seminars, you'll hear things like the presenter will say, oh, you have to do social media. Everyone has to be on social media. They'll say, you have to do SEO. Make sure you do all the SEO you can to get your site ranking. But we'd like to challenge that thinking and say that that is not always the case. Specific methods of digital marketing work really well with certain industries or certain budgets or certain goals, but not all. So we would rather you focus your time on the services that are actually going to make them. So some examples to illustrate that point, just some real basic examples. Let's say you're a brand new attorney in St. Louis. That would not, and they came to us looking to do SEO, that would be a bad fit. There's hundreds of law firms in St. Louis that have been competing in Google for 20 years. The chance of that brand new website and that brand new law firm actually making it to the first page is so low that even if you were to hire a company like ours to work on it with a huge budget for 5 years, it still might not be viable. So there's certain cases where you'll hear SEO, everyone should do it, but there's actually certain cases where it's not. Or let's say you have a website where you're selling $3 holiday cards. Google Ads is very powerful for most organizations, but that's an example where the cost of the item they're selling is so inexpensive, it would be very hard to achieve a positive ROI. Google Ads we'll talk more about later, but it's a pay-per-click system. Even if the clicks are 20 cents, I mean, depending on what the profit margin is, you would have to basically make a sale on almost every single click. Have a conversion rate close to 100%, and that's not feasible. So that would be hard for Google Ads. Or let's say you're an aerosol can manufacturer. As much as you may hope or believe that people really care about that, they likely don't. Your average person isn't going to get jazzed up about aerosol can manufacturing, so that would not be a great case to have a big social media. Not going to generate that much. So the lesson here is really just don't waste your time focusing on all methods of digital marketing or choosing services randomly. Follow the method that makes the most sense. So we're going to look at some of the most popular methods of digital marketing, and then we'll also talk a little bit about if those methods are a good fit and how to implement them. So the first of those three broad categories we'll go through is inbound marketing. So like I said, think of this as people that are specifically going out there onto Google and looking for your product or service. And I keep saying Google. Yes, there's other search engines, but Google has 90% of the market share, so we mainly just Google. It's generally associated with keywords, something that someone would be searching for example, basement waterproofing in St. Louis. So Google being the main source of inbound marketing, it's really split into three main pieces there. There's SEO, which those are the organic listings. There's Google Ads, which is essentially the paid version of the same thing. There's also Google Maps or Google My Business, which is essentially your profile that goes on Google. So the really powerful thing about inbound marketing, I'd say the main takeaway from this slide, inbound marketing, the person is showing buying intent. Or in the case of nonprofits, maybe they're showing donor intent or volunteer intent. But essentially the person wouldn't be searching for this unless they're interested. You already know that they're interested if you're going after the right terms. Cost per lead may be a bit higher with inbound marketing compared to some of the other methods, but the person's buying intent is so high that the chance of converting them into a donor or a volunteer or a sale is much greater. So just some examples here to illustrate those differences. So this would be a search engine optimization result. So as you can see, it doesn't say ad next to any of these. So these are just the free Google organic listings. These over here, these would be examples of the ads. So they used to be in a yellow box a few years ago. They were a lot more obvious. Now it's harder to see which ones are the ad. Really, the only way to tell is it says ad in bold right there in the upper left of the ad. And then this would be an example of the Google My Business or the Google Maps listing. So if you search nonprofits near me, you get some results. It shows them on a map. If you search a business or organization entity name specifically, you'll see that big right side that has often their logo, their phone number, website, all that kind of thing. So Google Maps and Google Business, this is one of the easiest and least expensive of all Google products. It's actually free. So this is something that everyone on this call should do if they haven't already done it, but you're able to claim your listing and verify it. Generally how that works is there's a little button somewhere under the Google My Business section that says claim this profile. You fill out a form and then it mails a postcard to the address on file with a PIN number. That's your way of verifying that you do in fact have access to that. So it usually takes about a week for the postcard to arrive. Be very careful about choosing the right organization category. This I'd say applies more to for-profits than nonprofits. Most of you would probably put down the category of a nonprofit. Make sure to add some photos. Some will automatically be in there from Google Street View, but you can definitely take some photos of the inside of your organization or some products or events and upload that to the profile. Getting reviews is big. That definitely helps the listing rise above others. The more reviews, the better. The higher the reviews, the better. But the main ranking factor for those listings is distance. So if Google thinks you're 500 feet from a certain nonprofit and someone's searching for nonprofits near me, well, no matter how many reviews it has, it will probably show that one first. I would say you definitely don't need an agency like ours to help with this. Like we do help our customers with this when it's needed, but if somebody is trying to do all this stuff on their own, this is one of the
Hey, Tim, do you mind speaking up just a little bit? Some people are having a little issue with their audio.
With the audio?
Yeah.
Is that a little better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. So for Google Ads, think of this as instant gratification compared to search engine optimization, which is more of a long-term investment. So we'll get more into search engine optimization later, but essentially SEO is something that takes 6 months, 9 months, a year, maybe even more. It's part of like a long-term strategy, where Google Ads, the moment they're running, you start getting results right away. So it has a pay-per-click pricing model. If somebody, excuse me, clicks on one of your ads, it costs, Google will bill you based on the cost of that ad. And how that cost is calculated is it's actually based on the free market on a bidding system. So if you say, okay, I'm willing to pay $5 a click for the keyword car donations, and someone else is willing to pay $6 a click, theirs is going to appear first. But the beauty of it is, if someone in a free market, generally someone wouldn't bid so much that it would make the clicks unprofitable. Otherwise, that would be, a not smart decision of theirs. So as long as most of the actors in the free market are making smart decisions, then the price of the clicks are usually pretty good. It can be very geographically targeted. It's based on keywords like SEO. So with Google Ads, though, with SEO, you may target 10 to 20 focus keywords at a time. With Google Ads, you could bid on 1,000 keywords at a time. One of the disadvantages with Google Ads is, especially as time has gone on, it's very complicated. This is one of the harder ones to do yourself, and I would generally recommend using an agency to manage it. Some of the agencies charge a flat fee, others charge a percentage of your ad spend. The most important metric when it comes to Google Ads, and this same concept really applies to all the services we're talking about today, would be conversions. So a common misconception with Google Ads is people really focus in on the cost per click, and they're like, oh, this keyword's only $1 compared to these others that are $3. Let's do that one. Well, maybe the reason it's only $1 is because the people that click on that don't actually convert and do what it is you want them to do on your website, like fill out a form or call. So maybe the $3 clicks, there's a much, much higher chance of people actually engaging. So if you calculate the cost per conversion rather than the cost per click, it's much better to optimize for that. And some agencies don't bother setting up those conversion tracking codes. So if you have a Google Ads campaign that's being managed, make sure that they're doing that. It will absolutely help with the efficiency. Like I said, it's very complex. We don't really have enough time in this presentation to dive through all of these, but just a quick example, like broad match keywords. When you're setting up Google Ads and you enter a keyword, let's say car donations, that would by default, it would be a broad match keyword. So what that means is, easy example, let's say the keyword you're bidding on, you're a video company and you bid on the keyword video. If someone types in how to make my own TikTok video, it could trigger your ad because of that broad match keyword for video. Well, that would be a total waste of a click for them. So that's where you would use either tighter phrase matching, exact matching, or negative keywords to make sure you're not showing your ad for keyword searches that don't really make sense for your service. Google Ads is appropriate for most industries. It's generally at least worth trying to calculate at a minimum the return that you get from Google Ads. There's some cases where it's not great, like if the cost per click spirals out of control. We had it happen once to a local car insurance client. Geico and Esurance, these big national companies, started just really upping their bids to a point that it just wasn't profitable anymore. So that does happen, but pretty rarely. It's also not a good fit when customers don't know your product or service exists. So I think that would be something to think about for a lot of the people on the call today, because a lot of your nonprofits do something that no one's ever heard of. So if they haven't heard of it, they're not going to be searching for it. So you might have to be a bit creative there. A lot of people will start with a Google Ads strategy and kind of phase it out over time if their SEO has been improving, because they won't need to be paying for those clicks that they're getting for free. But I think this is the most exciting takeaway. So if anyone was going to write something down about Google Slides or Google Ads, this would be it. So specifically for nonprofits, there's a program called Google Grants. Educational institutions are not eligible, but all other nonprofits are. We've probably had 20 clients apply over the years for Google Grants, and all of them have gotten accepted. And you end up getting $10,000 in free ad spend from Google each month that you can use on keywords related to your products or services. And then additionally, you get Google Workspace for free, which is Google's version of Office 365. One big misconception with this $10,000 is you probably won't be able to spend it all, or even close. I'd say the average we see is like $2,000 to $3,000. They made this ad spend so high, so you have more than enough. The goal is not to use it all, and it'd probably be nearly impossible to actually spend all that. It also limits you to only being able to focus on keywords that are $2 a click or less. So we have had some nonprofits not be able to do this. For instance, one was a nonprofit counseling center, and if they made bids for, divorce counseling, marriage counseling, addiction counseling, there were for-profit therapy institutions that were bidding $6 a click on those keywords, so they just weren't able to compete with the $2 max bid. But for most people, this ends up being a really good fit. Search engine optimization. So like I said, this is the long-term investment approach. It can have a really good ROI down the road, but it takes a really long time. So the clicks are free. These are those results that show up in Google just naturally. So if somebody clicks on any of those results, there'll be no billing. Those are just the ones that Google keeps available via net neutrality. SEO is constantly changing. Google used to release major updates every couple weeks. Now they still do, but on top of that, they're actually pushing out daily updates. SEO has become fairly expensive over time compared to what it used to be. One thing to watch out for is if you're talking to a company and they're like, oh, we'll do SEO for a few $100s a month, I would run the other way, because with a budget like that nowadays, they're not going to be able to move the needle, or they're going to use what are called black hat SEO techniques, which we'll talk about in a minute here. But keep in mind, if you just think of SEO like this, that Google's goal is to show the best possible results for what the user is searching for, and they want to be the best search engine in the world. So they don't want to show results of people that are just paying an SEO agency to make you rank higher. They want to show the best content. So if you have the best content, you deliver the best experience, so your pages load fast, it's mobile responsive, so it will rank high on mobile as well, you're going to be a lot more likely to rank. So kind of a brief history of SEO. For those of you that have been following this for 10 plus years, it's changed so much. Basically everything that used to work became black hat SEO, and now SEO is more about making your site and your content better and establishing really high quality backlinks. But there's like a lot of techniques, these black hat techniques, that still work for a very short period of time. So maybe you use these sketchy techniques that Google doesn't like anymore. It works really well for like 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden Google notices and they drop you to the 100th page because they leverage a penalty against you. Gray hat, that's kind of where people do a little bit of the black hat stuff, but a mix between what's considered good and bad by Google. And then white hat SEO, that's what our agency does and most reputable agencies, where getting better results is slow, but you're doing it the safe way. I would highly recommend only using this method. We have seen people come to us that used the sketchy black hat methods and they got kicked off of Google essentially. But SEO is very complicated. There's over 200 identified ranking factors. Some of the most important categories are the on-site SEO, so that's like the behind-the-scenes stuff on your own site, meta titles, meta descriptions, keyword-targeted content, that'd be like creating new blog posts or new articles that are rich in the keywords that you're wanting to rank for, and then keyword-targeted backlinks, which are essentially links elsewhere on the internet pointing to you, where another website is sharing you as a resource. So the entire strategy revolves around keyword research and tracking. Here's an old example, but basically this is just an example of keyword research where we would look at a lot of different keywords. So this is what you would want to do. You would want to, Google has a free tool called Google Keyword Planner. This data was gathered through SEMrush, which is a paid software. But essentially, if you look at your current rankings, you look at the keyword searches, so the average monthly number of times people search for that term, and then the difficulty, which is how hard it is to rank for it. So you have to take all these factors into consideration. what you'll often see is there's keyword searches that, keyword phrases that have really low volume. So maybe only 10 people a month are searching for it, but it's easy to rank for. Well, that's probably not worth going after, because sure, you get to the first page, but no one's really searching for it. And then the ones you find with a lot of volume are really competitive generally to rank for. So you have to kind of try and find that good balance between the competition and the search volume. Current ranking is also important. Like in this example, if you have something ranked 11th and 12th, these are huge opportunities, because if you only move up one spot or two spots, you're now on the first page and you get a big boost in traffic. So things that are on the second page are often worth focusing on, because especially when they're in that like 11 to 15 range, because a slight increase in rankings can turn into a big boost in traffic. Or if you're ranked 80th for something, it's going to be really hard to increase it by another 70 plus positions. And then SEO, like I said, where it's long term, if you ever zoom in on like a 30-day period, it looks a lot like the stock market. You have wild swings up and down. So if you look at SEO data, you really need to look on like a multi-month view and see what those general trends look like. So it's very similar to the stock market in that sense. I mean, as you can see in just one day here in this example, there was a big drop, but over the monthly view, at least you were able to see a positive trend. Sometimes this often looks even more wild. And certain months it'll go down, even when you're working on it diligently. You just really have to look at it on those long-term time frames. We don't have time for this today, but this is essentially just some of the things that to look at with SEO. I'll just briefly talk about a couple of them. So like your on-site SEO, this would be based around a keyword strategy where you're writing those meta titles and meta descriptions on each page. You want your site to be mobile responsive. Site speed is a huge ranking factor nowadays. Google really has been pushing that the last 2 years. If your site is slow, it will drop in the rankings. These are a bit more complicated, so we'll skip over these. Backlinks, like I said, those are links elsewhere on the internet pointing to you. So if you have, let's say, a page on your site about, 10 reasons to donate to a nonprofit this year, and there's 3 other websites out there sharing or linking to that page, and then you have a competitor with a similar article and it has 1,000 links pointing to it, which one's Google going to show higher? Obviously the one with 1,000 links, because it can see it has more authority. It's shared more, it's referenced more. This backlinks are the most abused thing when it comes to SEO. It's very hard to game the system there. Generally nowadays, it's kind of resorted to having to pay brokers that will sell placements on websites. So they'll have a bunch of websites they work with in their portfolio, and they'll say, hey, for $300, we'll post this article you write onto one of our client sites. The black hat version of that is companies would post it onto thousands of sites that are really low quality, and that's where you'll get heavily penalized. And then content, the one thing to write down from here would be, if you're writing blog posts for the purpose of SEO, this seems like a lot, but if you write them to be 2,000 or more words, your chance of being in the top 3 spots of Google goes up exponentially. Google, over the past few years, has not been putting a lot of 300-word articles at the very top. They don't see it as being rich enough content, so the longer articles do rank better. Just make sure you're not plagiarizing. Not even because of the ethical reasons, that too, but Google scans for duplicate content, and if they don't want the same content to appear twice in the search engine, so it has to be truly original. And then another easy thing that everyone here can do, if you haven't done it already, is local directory listings. So there's hundreds of online directories like Apple Maps, Google Maps, Yellow Pages, Bing, Merchant Circle, Yelp, Foursquare, the list goes on. Getting your organization listed in those with a consistent name, address, and phone number does help SEO, and then it does get you some traffic from those third-party sources. So most agencies use data aggregators to accomplish this. The most popular one is Yext. Yext is kind of expensive, so a lot of DIY people that are trying to get these local directory listings, some use Yext, it's not worth it financially. So some people do resort to entering the data manually. So you can do that manually, go into each of these services and create a profile, and it's very time consuming. It is a hassle. But the issue with Yext is Yext isn't like a one-time payment. They bill you every month, which is it's kind of annoying. It's their business model. There's no reason it has to be that way, but that's just how that company is run. So to determine if SEO is a good fit for you, ideally you would do a keyword research exercise, see if there's a good opportunity in terms of keyword volume versus competition. If you hire an agency to do an SEO audit, that's always a good place to start as well, because they can see where things are now. How is your site in terms of SEO? So I gave that example before where like a new attorney would be a bad fit for SEO, but let's say you're a manufacturer and you only have 2 competitors, that'd be a great fit because there's plenty of room for all of you on the first page. Nowadays, SEO does need a high budget, especially compared to 5 to 10 years ago, and it does take a long time, so it's not great for a brand new organization. Just like Google Ads, if people don't know about your product or service, which is probably the case for a lot of you today, then they won't know what to search for. So that could also make it not a good fit. Okay, so the outbound marketing category, I'll pick up the pace a little bit here. It's 11:30, so it's the opposite of inbound marketing. You're showing your ad and message to people who are not necessarily looking for it, so you're pushing that message out. It's great for branding and raising awareness for people that haven't heard of you. They're seeing your message over and over, ideally on social and display and these other platforms. Compared to like Google Ads, the pay-per-click of a click are generally much, much cheaper. Like a lot of these social platforms, the clicks are $1. And outbound marketing can include social media, both organic and ads, email marketing, display ads, video ads, some types of email market. Oh, I already said that. Okay. So display ads, I'm probably not going to recommend this for most of you today. It's most commonly used for larger entities and major brands, but this is essentially just like banner ads on websites. And because those don't work that well, not a lot of people, I mean, I'm sure basically no one on this call clicks on those display ads. What they do accomplish, though, is you see them. So even if you don't click on them, you see them. So if you keep seeing Coca-Cola's symbol all over these display ads, your brain is still processing that. So it's great for massive scale branding. They're often pay per impression model. Sometimes it's pay per click, but usually you see these priced as impressions per 1,000 CPM. So, you know, if it might be $17 and a CPM of $17, that means you'd pay $17 for 1,000 people to see the ad. So we recommend it sometimes once you're probably crossing that 20 million revenue barrier. Below that, I generally wouldn't recommend display ads. And really, even that's on the low side, like $1 billion plus would probably be more realistic. It's most commonly implemented through the Google Display Network. They have millions and millions of websites that have banner placements, but there's a lot of other display ad networks. Video ads, these are most commonly YouTube ads, but you're starting to see them more and more as display ads as well. These are generally a pay only if they watch it model. It's a bit more complicated than that. There's different payments for, if they finish it, then we pay more versus if they skip it after 5 seconds. Definitely don't get into this unless you have a high quality video. It would be a waste of time and money if you push out some video you shot on your iPhone with bad lighting. And again, this would be recommended for the larger organizations. It can be very appropriate for specific products. Like an example would be if I'm watching a video about financial forecasting, and then there's a company that has software that helps you with financial forecasting, well, they should definitely play that ad for me because I'm clearly interested in that topic right now. So when it comes to social media, there's 2 big categories there. There's the ads versus organic social media. So ads are generally a pay-per-click model, whereas the organic social media, that's when you just go on your Facebook page and you post something, you go on LinkedIn, you post something. So the organic side of it is not great unless you have a decent following. So if you have 8 followers and you're spending a ton of time posting stuff, generally at most 8 people are going to see that. Especially on Facebook, they did a family and friends update a few years ago that shows even less business page content to in people's feeds, and it focuses more on stuff that their family and friends are sharing. So it really has driven more people to have to do social media ads rather than or social media boosts rather than just general posting. A nice thing that a lot of people here can consider would be evergreen queue software. So there's one called Smarter Queue that we've used, but essentially what it does is if you have a lot of content you've created on social media over time and that content is evergreen, what that means is if you had a post that said, hey, this fall we have this certain event, that is not evergreen, because if someone sees that same post 6 months from now, it wouldn't make any sense. But if you have a post like, here's 10 tips when it comes to, blah, 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 well, those 10 tips would still apply 6 months from now. So you can put those evergreen posts into these queues, and the queues will recycle it. The software will automatically repost it for you every 6 months. So if you have a lot of content there, it's a really good, easy, cheap way of recycling content. But when it comes to social, overall, the creative is important. You must really entice or interest users with that creative. Consistency is key. Brand voice is key. If you're posting from a bunch of different people and the brand voice is always changing, that won't leave a good vibe. If you're posting 5 times a month and then the next month 0, it's hard to build a following that way if you're not consistent. And then just try new things, get creative. You could try contest polls, share photos, share case studies. People love before and after photos if you're in an organization that would have those. Videos and other compelling content. Really, there's endless strategies with social, so the sky's the limit in terms of creativity. Facebook, it's funny, I just went in and edited this slide. I said it's the king of social media, but their stock dropped 25% today, and the single greatest loss of wealth from a single company in a single day in history. So maybe not anymore. They might not have been a good idea to put all their weight behind virtual reality. But regardless, we're not talking about that today. Facebook does have inexpensive pay-per-click. So Facebook ads, for a lot of campaigns, you'll see cost per click of 50 cents to $1.50 for engagement. Don't hold me to that. It does depend on your competition and a lot of other factors, but tends to be the average. You can use incredibly powerful demographic and interest targeting with Facebook. One thing that a lot of people want to do, though, and the data we don't think is very good, is targeting professions. So if you're trying to target, let's say, project managers for whatever reason on Facebook, a lot of people don't have their proper job titles in there, don't list them at all, or have the wrong thing, or it's old. So I wouldn't rely too much on that for Facebook, but a lot of the other demographic targeting is really good. Make sure you install the Facebook tracking pixel. It's now called the Meta tracking pixel, so you can monitor conversions. A lot of you have probably used boosted posts. Definitely don't do that until you have at least a little bit of a following. And then that following, the data you can get back from it's very useful, because Facebook will actually tell you, it will say, hey, this post you made is getting 112% more engagement than your normal posts. This would be a good one to boost. That actually is pretty effective, because it's kind of like testing it with a focus group of sorts. Your followers, if they're engaging it with it more and it's taking off, then that's a good one to boost. And then boosted posts are usually cost per impression paid instead of cost per click, like the actual Facebook ads. So Facebook boosts are technically Facebook ads, but really they're a bit separate. The ads that I was talking about here are much more powerful and more complex. So organic Facebook is really effective for companies that have an interesting topic, like restaurants, nonprofits, shopping, large companies, or anything that's generally interesting. But for a lot of people, it's a hard truth to accept. But some people on Facebook don't care about your product or service. If it's a dry topic, I don't think that applies for most people here today. But if you're talking to a bunch of manufacturers and distributors, for instance, people aren't getting excited about distributors on Facebook. So be honest with yourself and decide if you're one of those interesting companies. So Facebook ads are more appropriate when you can target with the targeting potential that comes with demographic targeting. So for instance, if your service is expensive, then it makes Facebook makes it easy to target wealthy accounts or use indicators like let's go after people that are college educated in these certain zip codes. A good example of how targeted you can get is like an autographed Michael Jordan basketball. Probably the only people in the world that would buy those would be men, maybe in their 50s or 60s, that live in Chicago and have some signs of wealth. So that's a good example where you could do really good targeting. Twitter, I'll make this slide really short. Twitter's kind of dying when it comes to ads, at least. Some people have fairly active Twitter following if you're in like maybe a news-related field or you use it to communicate with existing customers, like, you know, the Missouri Department of Transportation tweets useful information about the road conditions, but this isn't where people are going to become interested in new products and services for the most part. And some people would argue with me on that, like, sure, you could maybe get some leads off Twitter, but I would much rather see you spend the same amount of time and money somewhere else where you'll get a better return on investment. Instagram, since Facebook owns it, it's really nice because you can manage Facebook and Instagram from the same platform. You can only post photos and videos, but one of the great things about Instagram is if you're trying to reach a younger audience, it definitely has a younger group of users than Facebook does. If you have compelling photos, then it makes it a hit. You'll get a lot of organic following if you're consistently posting really compelling photos or videos. We also recently, over the past couple of years, have seen a lot of the best organic growth and followers coming on Twitter, or I'm sorry, on Instagram. So LinkedIn is awesome for B2B advertising that's targeting a specific profession. So if you are targeting like those project managers, like in my previous example, you can actually show ads on LinkedIn by job title. So if you were doing job title advertising, it's a good solution. Another thing that works really well, believe it or not, it's not feasible to do this onshore because of the amount of just manual labor and effort that goes into it, but there's a lot of virtual assistants that will log into your LinkedIn account for you, send out connections to your target market, and then send them templated messages that you would create. So for instance, we've been doing that at Beanstalk for years. We get probably 3 meetings a week from it. On a bad week, we'll get at least 1. But essentially, the virtual assistants in our accounts are sending out these connection requests, and when someone accepts, they start sending this cadence of messages. And when someone starts engaging, then they let us know, hey, this person wants to set up a meeting, or they send our Calendly link, and it all happens automatically. But it sounds weird, but it works really well. And like I said, it takes them a lot of actual raw hours, so it's not very feasible to do that profitably with a U.S. virtual assistant. Geofencing is one of the new and exciting products. It gets a bit creepy, but essentially we can use software to draw actual lines around places on a geographic map. And anyone that enters that geofence, you can harvest what's called a mobile ID from the device, and then you can upload those mobile IDs to Facebook and Instagram. Right now, those are the only 2 major platforms that support it. And then you can show those people ads. So if there's a place where your target definitely congregates, geofencing can be incredibly powerful. And we've used it for even really weird stuff too. We had one customer that had an app that targeted people that play the lottery a lot, so we geofenced a bunch of 7-Elevens. Or one where they sold, the only buyers of their products were water utility companies. We just geofenced all the water utility corporate offices around the country. And then the nurturing campaign, or the nurturing arm of digital marketing, there's really a lot that goes in here, but the main 2 that I'm going to talk about are remarketing, also called retargeting, and then email marketing, specifically marketing automation. The remarketing and retargeting, I'm sure you've all seen this, but these are those ads that follow you around. So let's say you go and you look at a watch that you want to buy, and then next thing you know, you see the watch on Facebook, you see the same watch on ESPN, you see it on STL Today, you see it on an app on your phone. It's very powerful. It has a great ROI for almost every organization because it ends up being very inexpensive. The reason being is the max audience you're showing these ads to are the number of visitors to your site. So if you have 1,000 visitors a month, the most people that will be seeing your retargeting ads are 1,000 people. And then you can also set it up where they only pay if they actually click on the ad. And then the clicks aren't even that expensive, or usually around a dollar or two. So, most people would happily pay $1 or $2 to someone that's kind of on the fence about, let's say, being a donor or a volunteer or hiring you for your services. It'd be great to, pay $2 to get them to come back. And then it keeps you top of mind as, if you haven't followed them around for a month or two, depending on your sales cycle, maybe it's only a couple weeks, but they keep seeing your brand over and over and over. So these are, again, I would have said in the past, these are creepy, but everyone's used to this now. So I don't think this is creepy anymore. Geofencing might be, but this is pretty standard practice nowadays. And then email marketing, I think this is my last one. There's 3 kind of levels to email marketing in terms of increasing complexity. There's email blasts, there's email drip campaigns, and then there's email marketing automation. So I'm sure almost all of you do email blasts, and that's just where you send the same email to a bunch of people at once on a list. If you're not doing that, you definitely should be, at least have like a monthly or quarterly newsletter. Email drip campaigns are a slightly more complicated version of that, and both MailChimp and Constant Contact support this. But what a drip campaign is not only do you send your, let's say, quarterly blasts, but the drip campaign is a pre-built cadence of emails that go out on a certain schedule. So if to different people at different times. So if I join your email list today, maybe it automatically sends me a thank you for signing up email within 12 hours. Then maybe it waits 7 days and it sends me email number 1 of your series. And then maybe it waits 10 days after that, it sends email number 2. And then maybe after it sends emails for a while on that rapid cadence, it switches to sending something once a month. So it basically automates that email process for you. And then email marketing automation, that is done with platforms like Pardot or HubSpot. The one we use is SharpSpring. And that's kind of like the email drip campaign on steroids. This is very expensive to set up. It's a large project, but it kind of turns into a part-time marketer, part-time salesperson that works for you 24/7. It does all sorts of crazy stuff. I think I have an example on the next slide I can show that will help make it more sense. But for instance, some of the stuff it can do is like account-based marketing. Let's say 2 of your targets are dentists and another target is manufacturers. You can send the same email to both of them, and if in your database it knows this recipient's a dentist, maybe it will say, we are the best solution for dentists in the Midwest with a picture of teeth. And then the same email that goes to the manufacturer, if in your database they're have to check next to the manufacturing industry, then it'll say the best solution for manufacturers in the Midwest with a picture of a conveyor belt. You can have all sorts of triggers and actions to build out all these complex automations. One of my favorites is everything someone does. It assigns a score to their account. It's tracking everything they do. So maybe every page they look out on your website adds 2 points to their score. Every email they get from you that they open adds 5 points. If they click a link in the email, it adds 7 points. If they fill out a form, it adds 20 points. And then you can have triggers that say, if someone hits a score of 70 points, then create a task for Billy to give this person a call or shoot them a personalized email, because now it's not a cold call or a cold email, it's like a warm call. The person's engaged, they definitely know who you are at this point if they've achieved a score that high. So, I mean, I could go on for an hour about marketing automation, but that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. Email marketing is something every organization should do, period. Just make sure it's done right. So you want it to be consistent. You want the content to be valuable. Don't just send all the time updates about yourself. Also send valuable assets to your clients' information they'll find interesting. And then try and focus on building your own email list. Don't buy one. That one's kind of a legal gray area anyway. And usually you won't get that great of responses from the purchased email list. And this is just a little screenshot. It's probably too hard to see, but just kind of an example of the inside of marketing automation. This is Salesforce's Pardot tool. But as you can see, these are like triggers and actions, like, send this email, then wait 4 days. If they do open it, then go to the right. If they don't open it, go to the left, and then send them this email. And then if they do this action, then add them to this list. If they do this other action, then assign them to a user. So you can get incredibly creative and build really cool stuff with that. And that's it. So we're now at the question stage. And then I have my contact info here as well, because I know we don't have a ton of time to answer questions. So if anyone wants to email us, I didn't put my email on here. Let me pull that up. Email. And then feel free to call us or visit our website. We're always happy to have a conversation. And like I said, if we run out of time to answer your questions, feel free to send more.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for that. That was so wonderful, so helpful. We do have a few questions in the chat that I thought you might be able to answer or bring up in front of the larger group. We've had a lot of people who are interested in those drip lists in MailChimp. Those are very easy for a user to set up on their own, correct?
Yeah, those are pretty easy. Luckily with MailChimp, it's such a large software that if you go on YouTube, there's hundreds of MailChimp tutorials made by people, not even at MailChimp, just content creators that have created these really useful tutorials. So I would start there, start on YouTube. If you prefer the written form, there's plenty of written tutorials as well.
Great. We also have a lot of people who are interested in setting up geofencing. Would you also suggest that they just check out some tutorials online for that?
That one I probably should have mentioned, like Google Ads, geofencing is probably one you'd want to do with an agency, not just because of necessarily the complexity, but the cost of the data. So all those companies that we buy the data from, it's very expensive. So it's only cost effective that we are then making that data available to multiple clients. If we were to do it for one client, there's no way it'd be worth it.
Definitely makes sense. Okay, let's see. We also had one more very general question about someone who was interested in learning how they could build their social media audience, particularly on Facebook. Obviously, that's like a huge question. That's the #1 question for anybody who has a social media account for their organization. But is there a particular resource you would point people in the direction of?
Yeah, really the very most effective way, especially as the years have gone on, people are less likely to just like and follow pages. It's become more and more rare, is specifically to do a likes and follows campaign. So with the Facebook ads, there's all these different calls to action that you can implement. So like often you'll see them that are, if you click, it's visit website, or if you click, it's shop now, which is basically visit website. Well, there's another version that's actually a like or a follow. So if you click on that, then if someone engages with the ad, then it just signs them up to follow and like your page. But the cool thing is it's cost per click or cost per engagement in that case. So you basically then are paying for each follow. Ideally, they'd be around $1. That's the most effective way. The other way is much more of a dice roll, but if you can put out really, really good content that genuinely interests people, you can organically start getting people to follow, but it's a lot more rare than people think. It sounds easier than it is.
Great, thank you. Hopefully several people asked that question, hopefully you find that helpful. We've also had a few people ask about if contacts for your e-newsletters need to opt in for you to be able to email them. Of course, the answer to that question is yes, and you also need to provide them with an unsubscribe option on any e-newsletter you send. Tim, would you have anything you'd like to add to those kinds of questions?
Yeah, so it's still actually kind of a gray area, but the legislation for that is finally starting to roll out. So I think California's is starting to get stricter, and then other states or the federal government plan on rolling out more of their own. Europe rolled out GDPR, I guess it's probably been a few years now, So there is a lot of gray area still there, but I would assume, just going forward in your mind, assume you have to get opt-ins, and you definitely have to have that ability to let people unsubscribe. And it has to be easy. It's like a one-click unsubscribe. You can't make it complicated, and you can't try to hide it.
Thank you. Great. Another question from Brenda. Do you have any recommendations on ways to show the value of organic social media?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to show the value in terms of if it's a campaign you're already doing would be Facebook or Instagram or any of the organic platforms. They have pretty good data dashboards, so you can go in and really analyze that data and see what kind of results you're achieving. My favorite thing to look at for organic campaigns is month over month, or comparing to a previous time period is what I find to be the most useful. If you just look at it randomly and you see, oh, we added 16 followers and got 180 post engagements, what's that mean? Really nothing, unless you're comparing it to something else. So if you're doing a lot of organic efforts and you see those engagement numbers going up month over month compared to a previous time period, then that's when probably the best way to measure success.
Yeah, you know you're doing something right when you see that happen.
Yeah.
We also had a few people ask about different email marketing products: MailChimp, Salsa, Constant Contact. Personally, I'm familiar with MailChimp, like it a lot. Do you have a preferred product for email marketing?
Yeah, I think MailChimp and Constant Contact are both really good. It's one of those things, kind of like Office 365 versus Google Workspace. Whichever one people use is the one they prefer. So if the first one you use is Constant Contact, you'll probably say you like that one better. But they're very similar. When it comes to marketing automation, there's a lot more to say about that. But marketing automation those are much bigger platforms than MailChimp and Constant Contact.
Okay, great. I do not see any other questions in the chat from anybody. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to add? You're welcome to put your question in the chat or unmute temporarily to ask it.
I have something, Tim. Obviously, there's a ton of information here, and like some nonprofits may not have a really robust development, like a web development team or digital marketing team, communications team. However, if we were just getting started, what would you recommend be the first step for nonprofits? Like, obviously, there's email marketing, there's social media, there's website things. Like, where should they start? Or what would be a good place to start to implement some of this?
In terms of doing it DIY?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Until
I would
they can
say
actually get someone to help support them.
Yeah. So I would say number one, if you're doing DIY, is definitely do the Google My Business listing. That one's very easy. You can do the same thing for like Apple Maps. Google Grants is awesome. Sadly, it does end up being the Google ad management platform, which is incredibly complex. But because the clicks are free, it's a really good starting point. So if you got an agency to help you, or you did try and take a crack at it, at least if you're trying it yourself and you mess up, the budget's free. So you can't do much damage. And then social media organic management is something that I think a lot of people can do pretty well DIY. At the end of the day, you know your own services and your own organization better than anyone you'll hire. So, you can come up with some pretty good, compelling content yourself if you really set aside the time. And I would recommend for all this DIY stuff to make sure it's consistent, to maybe block off maybe an hour a week on your calendar to just focus on it then. And that way you make sure you're at least addressing it once a week.
Great, thank you. That's super helpful. We did have a couple more specific questions come in over the chat. Denise is wondering if backlinking is the same as partner linking. I believe you said that that's a very helpful tool that can help with SEO, correct?
Yeah, so partner linking, if what you mean by that is reciprocal backlinks, then reciprocal backlinks don't really help you anymore as far as an SEO standpoint. So that would be if you link to your friend and your friend links to you, the links kind of cancel each other out because it's so easy to abuse. That's why Google ignores it. It doesn't hurt anything, but anything that they know you can easily accomplish artificially, they will really not give you credit for, since, like I said, just with SEO, if you can almost answer all your own questions if you keep thinking, what if Google wants to show the best search result, then reciprocal links won't make that result any better. So they really want to show the best content, the most relevant content that's not artificially put there by SEO methods.
That makes sense. But a backlink that is not a reciprocal link would be beneficial, right? Okay.
Yeah, I believe they're called backlinks. The term originated because it's a link back to you.
Okay, that makes sense. And then one very specific question here from Stephanie. We are an environmental nonprofit, and Facebook keeps flagging my volunteer posts as a special ad category. So they're having targeting issues. That might be something that might be better handled over an email between you and Stephanie, but if there's an obvious answer there, if you can see the question in the chat.
Yep, I can. The quick answer there would be you need to contact Facebook support. If you struggle with that, feel free to reach out to us, because being a Facebook ad partner, we have a better line to get in touch with them, but they false flag stuff all the time. If they think it has anything to do with altering, if it's a political message or it's supposed to be changing the minds of people in your community, they might flag that as well, and it's a thin line that you walk if it's supposed to affect people's opinions about something in your community. I guess the Russians kind of ruined that for us, because now a lot of our clients that have good messages we want to push out, they really had to crack down on that.
All right, well, I am not seeing any other questions in the chat. So I think we are good to go ahead and wrap up. Neosha, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to say thank you so much, Tim. This was very helpful. Lots of good information.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
This is the first time we've had someone that I could rely on to talk about digital marketing. So this has been awesome. So we appreciate it. There was a question. Will you make your slides available for us to just send out to the group? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I will make a note to do that.
Awesome. Thank you. And then we'll repost the webinar as well once we have the recording. And then if you all have any other additional questions or anything regarding Gives Day, the digital marketing, Tim provided his email. Feel free to reach out or reach out to Emily and I. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your snow day. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tim.